We've got the power, we just need to plant it. We'll show you how, so stick with us.
Today on Horsepower TV, it's a tale of 2 traction bar upgrades, first leaf springs on this Camaro, and coilovers for a classic Chevelle. It's a Kentucky Bluegrass Streetcar Shootout in our Race of the Week, and choosing the right rims and rubber in our Quick Tech segment. So hang on for Horsepower TV.
Hi, welcome to the Horsepower Shop. You know, I guess all of us love to focus our attention under the hood. That way we can brag to our buddies about how much horsepower we're making. This Chevelle here has been punched out to 460 cubic inches. It makes over 500 horsepower. But you know something? All that power won't do you any good unless you can plant it to the pavement.
That's right. Now today, we're going to pay a little bit of attention to the suspension. We're going to show you a couple of bolt-ons that'll not only help you plant your power, but they're also going to help you lower your ET. When it comes to traction devices, there are basically 2 types of suspensions, the kind that use leaf springs and the kind that use coils. Now, they both work differently and require different hardware to get the job done. Now, today, we're going to bolt up both of them.
First, the leaf spring. You might recall a few months ago we added a 440-horse ZZ4 engine to Chuck's Camaro, and adding all that horsepower just made the traction problems worse. The Z28 has a stock leaf spring suspension that tends to wrap up during acceleration. That can cause wheel hop. Not only is it hard to get down the track, but it's hard on parts too. U-joints, clutch, and transmission, to name a few.
Most traction devices do a couple of things to help you get off the line. First of all, they help reduce unwanted suspension deflection or movement, and second of all, they help with the weight transfer to the rear wheels where it'll do the most good. Now, not surprisingly, the sophistication of the setup also helps determine how efficiently that traction device is going to work. The most basic of all is this simple bolt-on slapper bar here. It's inexpensive, easy to install, and, well, it has no adjustments. Consequently, it's also the least effective of the bunch and should probably only be used on mild street machines.
Good point. Now, the next step up, though, is what's commonly referred to as the J-bolt traction bar. It attaches to the rear end with these J-bolts that allow you to tune the bar by adjusting the snubber air gap. By the way, it's engineered to position the snubber directly beneath the front spring eye for improved weight transfer and to prevent spring wrap-up. By the way, this type of traction bar was used in some of the earliest Pro Stockers. It'll harness up to 450 horsepower.
Now, the one that we'll be installing on the Camaro represents the latest in leaf spring technology. It's called the Slide-A-Link from Competition Engineering. Now, the rear mount replaces the stock shock plate, while the front mount bolts right up to that front spring eye bracket, giving us 2 solid points for torque transfer. Of course, the free play and preload adjustments are made right here on these 2 adjusting screws. And I'll tell you what, we're going to get going by supporting the rear end and removing those leaf springs. With the springs removed, unbolt the front spring hangers. Well, now we're ready to press out the stock rubber bushings so we can replace them with these aluminum ones that came in the kit.
Now, of course, unless you have a press at home, that means a trip to the machine shop. Come on, I'll drive.
Oh, man, I got to ride in your Mustang?
Okay, now we're ready to reassemble our front spring hanger. We get started by sliding on our new spring eye bracket, making sure that the clamp end here points away from the spring eye. Then we can install the sleeve and the spring clamp over the leaf spring. There, that's tight. Well, next, the original spring hanger can go back on, like that, followed by the through bolt. Now, once you finish on the other side, you'll be ready to reinstall the leaf springs.
With the rear end resting back on the springs, we can go ahead and bolt up the new rear mount. Now, it's held in place with some new U-bolts. And once we get everything cinched down, we can torque those U-bolts to 75 foot-pounds. We've pre-assembled the sliding link to show you how everything goes together. Now here are a couple of tips for you. Make sure that you use anti-seize on all your threads and that the rod ends thread a minimum of 1 inch into the body here. Now back here, the adjusting screw, this part right here, needs to be threaded into the body at least 2 inches. Oh, and one final thing. We're going to put some wheel bearing grease right here on the sliding tube to make sure nothing binds up. Well, you got 75 there?
Got her.
All right.
Okay. Now this link assembly bolts up to the spring eye bracket first.
There's the bolt.
Okay. Adjust the length of the link until the holes line up. Slide the bolt through and torque it to 75 foot-pounds. Rotate the tube until there's a 1/2 inch gap between the urethane shock pad and the stop. Then tighten the front 5/8 bolt till the nut just barely touches the bracket. Then give it another 1/2 turn. Be careful not to over tighten it or you'll bind up your suspension.
Now check all your bolts one last time to make sure they're all tight and that you have a 1/2 inch gap at the shock pad. Then we can go ahead and lower the car down. With the car's weight back on the wheels, that 1/2 inch gap disappears, but you should still be able to rotate the rear bar by hand.
So if you can't turn it, what does that mean? You got preload?
Oh, you are so right, Snubberbeth. Now you only need to shorten that link until it goes away.
Well, we've got to go away too, but just for a minute. Now we'll be back with a coil spring no-hop hop-up after this.
Keep it planted.
At my age, it's more rush than anything I do. If it goes straight, it's fun, and if it doesn't go straight, it's exciting.
Hang on for an exciting brand of drag racing on a budget when we take you to the track later on Horsepower TV. Also, Chuck shows you some winning ways to plant the power on this weekend's Quick Tech.
Hey, welcome back to the shop and the second phase of our traction bar tech. In case you just joined us, we just bolted up a competition engineering slide-a-link to the leaf springs of Chuck's Camaro. Well, now it's the 72 Chevelle's turn.
That's right. Now, earlier we gave you a quick look at this 500 horsepower, 460 cubic inch monster. Now, on the outside, it's basically stock, except for those 5-spoke Americans. Underneath, there's an M22 4-speed that spins a set of 355 gears and a 12-bolt rear end that's hung from a pair of coil springs. Now, it's a killer combination, but it really shocks the drivetrain every time it launches.
The suspension on that Chevelle is basically a non-adjustable forward link, which is pretty efficient, but we can help it with this coil spring traction bar from Competition Engineering. Here's how it works. The rear of the bar attaches to the car's controlling arm mount. This radius rod here attaches to a rear end bracket. Now, the snubber contacts the frame, and the radius rod controls the snubber to frame clearance. Well, the idea, again, is to reduce deflection and improve weight transfer.
Well, I've got the car in the air and supported by jack stands right here on the frame. Plus, I'm also supporting the rear end with our floor jack. Now, we're going to get started by removing this rear control arm bolt first. The kit comes with both left and right traction bars, and each one is angled differently to make sure the snubber will come in contact with the frame. Now, before you bolt them up, you want to test fit them first to determine which one goes where. After removing the car's rubber snubber, you can attach the upper radius rod to the outside of the housing bracket. Make sure there's at least 1 inch of thread engagement on the rod ends. Lower the jack stands, but keep the car supported on the floor jack at the rear end to simulate ride height. Then you can raise the bar so you can insert the rod end into the bracket. Finally, adjust the radius rod to give an 1/8 inch air gap between the snubber and the frame.
Well, hey, man, you've already done all the work.
Well, what's so surprising about that? But you know what? I still need to get the wheels and tires on and get it back on the ground.
Hey, while you're doing that, I want to show you something else that'll help you keep your rear end planted.
Now, that's something you're an expert on.
Swapping your shocks is a way to improve traction even further, especially when they're tunable like these we got from Howe. These are externally adjustable with 12 settings for easy tuning. Now out back, you want to tighten compression and rebound for a stiffer ride and to keep the suspension under control. Up front, however, you want to loosen the setting on the extension to let the front end rise and to transfer weight. By the way, the new shocks bolt right up in place of the stockers.
Well, that ought to take care of our wheel hop problems and help us get down the track a little bit quicker. Now, the traction bars are a pretty quick bolt-on too. The Camaro over there took us about 4 hours to complete, and the Chevelle, about 2.
Yeah, the price ain't too bad either. The slider link for the Camaro set us back about $300. We paid about $175 for the adjustable T-bars and about $140 a piece for the shocks.
Now, it should come as no shock to you that we need to take a little bit of a break right now, but there's a whole lot more yet to come.
You bet, so stay with us.
Next, when the Christmas tree lights turn green, you can bet on a red-hot time in Kentucky. It's the NSCA Bluegrass Shootout, and we ain't just horsing around.
Horsepower TV's Race of the Week. Trackside reports from America's best grassroots drag racing events.
It's the National Streetcar Bluegrass Shootout here in the real heart of horse racing, Kentucky. So get your bluegrass on, get your hay stacked up, and get ready to go.
These NSCA races are an eyeful for spectators and the ultimate thrill for streetcar racing rivals. The coolest thing about this series is the fact there's a class for every contender with a need for speed.
There's a good mix, big blocks, small blocks, turbo V6s, the whole gambit. And technology runs from carburetors all the way to laptops and fuel injection.
If you're running in the top class, Pro Street, this is the competitor you want to copy. Pat Busey's winning runs in the high sixes make him and his Camaro a virtual shoe-in for another championship.
I'd like to have the title, you know. I guess nothing's sewed up yet, but I'm going to try to sew it up here this weekend.
Let's say you don't quite have the funds for these big 17-inch racing slicks or a big trailer tricked out with all the tools, technology, and crew that you got to have to go Pro Street. Now let's say you don't quite have the budget for one of these big monster Busey motors. Well, in that case, Limited Street. It could be your kind of class.
Limited Street is basically for small block cars that weigh 8.5 pounds per cubic inch of engine. Modifications are limited, which is great for limited budgets. It was a class that attracted 2 former Georgia rivals, the driver of this Nova SS, Kevin Scott, and his crew chief and pal, Danny Hogue.
I had won a championship last year, and we just felt like together as a team we could do a better job together. It's a symmetrical port Buick headed small block. It's an old comp eliminator style motor.
The first couple passes was unique, watching the car go down the track and me still standing there. But I like the niche of working on one. I don't mind driving. I drove for years. But it's just like 2 heads are better than one. Let him sit in the car. He can tell me what the car is doing, and I can go back and read everything else.
While Fords and Chevys dominate the class, Virginia veterinarian Alan Witter makes his bid for a championship in this 87 turbo V6 Buick.
The turbocharger is the most efficient way to make horsepower. The hard part is when you're running races is handicapping them so the classes are fair.
And that means Alan has to carry a lot more weight than nitrous cars, but he still managed to make a strong bid for the title. Meanwhile, qualifying in all classes was well underway Saturday when suddenly a nitrous fire broke out in the Chevelle driven by Nostalgia Pro Street leader John Cervantes.
Thank God upstairs. He's with us, so we'll get it together and hopefully we'll be there tomorrow, on race day.
Here on Sunday, Eliminations Day, after thrashing most of the night, the Cervantes crew hopes to recover from the nitrous fire, fire up the Chevelle, and, well, go on to win. Looks pretty good, but now the moment of truth. Man, incredible. What's
24 John made it through round 1 of eliminations with a win before losing here in round 2.
But hey, there's a reason, you know, go home, we'll fix it up and come back again and get it, you know. Can't give up that easy.
Meanwhile, it was Buick versus Nova as Winter won over Scott in Limited Streets round 2 with an 875 to an 884.
It was a good race, so it was close. We didn't get him till 1,000 foot. It was even till then, and then turbo cars usually pull a little bit on the big end. So, good race.
In the finals, though, it was Mustang Mike Modeste from Brooklyn who took the win light and the class lead with this 865 run.
Safe to say it'll be a happy trip back to Brooklyn for the Brooklyn Warriors, right?
Yeah. Number one. Oh, yeah. Our next meet is in Michigan, so I guess everybody will be gunning for us.
A freak red light from UC paved the way for Ross Stomp to win Pro Street with a 708 at 199 miles an hour.
This weekend we just decided we'll run a good safe race, put a safe tune-up in it, and be consistent, and that happened to win. Consistency wins.
It sure does. And even in Limited Street, there are consistent challenges and thrills whenever the street fighters of NSCA gather to do battle. Next, looking for the ultimate power planter? Well, stay tuned for Chuck and this week's Quick Tech right after this.
Welcome back to the shop. No matter how much horsepower you're making, the last link in transmitting that power is the rubber that meets the road. So today we're going to take a look at some of your options when it comes to choosing the right rubber for your street machine. Now, an all-out drag slick is probably the ultimate power planter, but they don't have the tread or the sidewall to be used legally on the street. Now, your first option would be a tire like this Mickey Thompson ET Street, which isn't a whole lot more than a thinly disguised drag slick. It does, however, have a rudimentary tread pattern and enough sidewall to get that DOT approval. You can run them on the street, but you better find a place to park them as soon as the rain starts falling. Now, an even more streetable choice would be their Sportsman Pro. It has a full tread, an even stiffer sidewall, and that all-important DOT approval. The tread is made from a soft and sticky compound for maximum traction, but I gotta tell you, it shortens the life expectancy considerably. Switching brands, Hoosier has their QuickTime that's a good compromise between traction and tread wear. Now, it's got a full-face tread and a compound that's just a little bit harder, plus a sidewall that'll wrinkle when you run it under low pressure at the track. Now, when you run them on the street, make sure that you inflate them, though, to the manufacturer's recommended specs. Now, Hoosier also has this new Pro Street radial that's designed to fill your wheel wells, give you a radial ride, and let you run in the rain. This tread design provides an easy exit path for water to give you stability and traction, and as you might expect, they also get the nod of approval from DOT.
Of course, all these tires come in sizes ranging from huge to humongous, but you forgot to tell them the part that wheels play in all this.
I did, didn't I? So why don't you tell them about it?
Okay, well, simply put, the lighter the wheel, the less rotating mass and quicker you get off the line. For example, these aluminum Warriors here from Centerline each weigh about 14 pounds less than these steel rims. That could mean a couple of hundredths off your starting line time, maybe enough to win at the finish line.
You bet. And don't forget how cool they'll make you look, too. Now, don't go away. We've got some cool hot parts right after this.
Horsepower TV's Hot Parts. A close-up look at the latest in high-performance hardware.
First, there's a trick tranny pan from Moroso with a billet aluminum pan rail, a deep sump for extra capacity, and magnetic drain plugs for easy servicing. Now, the whole assembly is fully heliarc welded for strength and cool looks. And hey, you can look for pricing to start at about $170.
Now, if you're looking for something on the cutting edge, what about this RotoZip spiral saw? With the included zip bits, you can now make freehand cuts through plastic, fiberglass, wood, even metal. And with the optional zip mate here, it becomes a circular saw, cut-off tool, even a grinder polisher. So now you can zip through the toughest of projects for about $90 for the basic kit.
Well, here's a new spin on American's torque thrust wheel. The traditional gray spoker is now available in 16 and 17-inch diameters, so you can use high-tech rubber and still keep that classic look. Now, the two-piece construction is considerably lighter than their cast counterparts, and hey, these things will lighten your wallet a little bit too. Prices start at about $190 a piece.
Okay, well, we've got a heavyweight horsepower TV show for you next week. Here's a preview.
It made over 400 horsepower on our engine dyno. Now we'll get ready to drop the 351 Windsor into our Project Pro Touring Pony. And we'll give you some engine swapping tips along the way. Our race of the week takes you to Norwalk for an historic IHRA Top Stock Shootout. Plus a quick take on the latest in horsepower enhancing laughing gas. No joke.
And remember, high performance fun is what this show is all about.
For information about the products used in today's show and more, check us out online at horsepowertv.com. Horsepower TV is an RTM production.